Welcome, campers. Bring your marshmallows and take a seat around the fire. We've got a story to tell. Growing up, I was always a skeptic about ghosts and the paranormal. No matter how many ghost stories I heard or shows I watched, the evidence was just never enough to convince me. A door opens, it was tugged with fishing line, taps on the walls. It's just somebody in the other room, knocking on it for the camera. Strange faces or figures in the background of photos. That's simply the effect of pareidolia. Nothing ever seemed concrete. There was always some sort of logical explanation I could think of to explain away any weird happenings. Until that night. I was in my last year of college and looking to get away before heading into my full-time career. I'd always loved camping in the outdoors, so taking some time away from society during this hectic period sounded like the perfect idea. I had been going to school in another state outside of the one I'd grown up in, so I didn't know the woods here very well. I ended up Googling around to find nearby campsites and asking friends to decide where to go. I ended up settling on Lavender Ridge, a quaint campground about an hour north of my school, settled in a picturesque mountain range. The hike to the site was rated as intermediate, so I felt confident enough in my abilities to get there, and I was excited to see somewhere new. So that following Friday, I packed up a backpack of gear and camping essentials and then hit the road. The drive there was easy, peaceful honestly the further out I got. The city became more sparse as the trees became denser, and soon I'd completely left my big college town behind. Eventually I pulled off into a small gravel parking lot and collected my gear, making sure to lock the car behind me. I set off following the trail as it snaked its way up the mountainside. The view down into the valley below was breathtaking, and I found myself stopping to take photos frequently. By the time I reached the marked campsite I'd learned about, the sun was beginning to set, but I didn't mind. I still had enough light to set up and settle in. I had expected nothing but a dirt clearing where you could set your tent down, but the campsite had more to it than that. There were picnic tables and a small structure containing an outhouse. Behind that was a playground for children accompanying their parents, but it seemed worse for wear. The once white picket fence surrounding the play area was discolored, rotting and falling down in many places as the weeds and vines slowly overtook it. Within what was left of the fence was a slide, 2 swings, and a seesaw. All were in various states of disrepair, as the wood once holding them together crumbled and left only the rusted metal skeletons behind. Setting up my tent near the playground felt more like camping near a cemetery. The vibe was somber and eerie, and it felt like a metaphor for my life somehow. When I graduate college, that marks the end of my youth and the beginning of the rest of my life. No more school or late night parties and drinking until the sun rises. This time next year, I'll be sitting behind a desk, just another cog in a corporate machine. I decided to take this trip in honor of my love of the outdoors growing up. It was like one last hurrah before adult responsibilities finally take hold. So in a way, it's as if I were here to say goodbye to my childhood, making this decaying play yard almost poetic. By the time night fell, I'd successfully set up my camp with a roaring campfire going. For dinner, I had hot dogs on a stick slowly toasting over the fire, and some potatoes wrapped in tinfoil that were roasting. There was a slight breeze as I inhaled the crisp evening air and smiled to myself. This is a feeling I've missed. There's something special about surviving side by side with nature like this, allowing you to relax and reconnect. I'll have to remember to make time for future camping trips once I've settled in at my new job. Nights like this will keep me sane within the sea of cubicles. But with the breeze came the occasional eerie sounds from the playground. The brittle plastic swings were swaying side to side as their metal chains creaked in protest. That'll be fun to sleep with. I chuckled to myself, shaking my head. At least I knew the sounds now, so they wouldn't bother me much that night. Then I took a second look around the open camping area. It's strange that not a single other person is here. According to Google, this is actually a pretty popular spot, so it's odd for it to be so practically abandoned during peak camping season. As this thought crossed my mind and I looked over at the crumbling playground, I had a realization. Maybe this place is abandoned. I hadn't looked at any recent reviews, I just looked for a campsite with views, and this is what had come up. But if this campsite is still so beloved as Google made it seem, why are the facilities in such bad shape? The thought did little to comfort me as I ate and then crawled into my tent for the night. Perhaps I should do more due diligence in the future when picking spots. Why would such a nice, beautiful location be abandoned? It didn't make any sense to me. The hike was fun, and the campsite itself is great, especially if things were fixed up a bit. I was beginning to drift off to sleep with these thoughts in mind when I thought I heard a distant whisper. I shrugged it off, assuming it was just the wind, but it persisted and seemed to be joined by other voices. Soon there were a chorus of whispers, as if the woods all around me were full of people standing in wait, watching my tent. "Hello?" I called out. The whispers didn't stop, but a new sound joined them. Laughter, like that of a small child's. Hearing a kid laugh when you know for a fact you haven't seen a kid anywhere near here has got to be one of the most unnerving sounds. I froze and paused my breaths for a moment, straining to listen for any other sounds. Soon I could hear the grass nearby crunching, as if someone were walking through it. Someone must have joined me after all, I thought to myself, but it's strange that they hadn't arrived until midnight with no flashlights or anything to see with. I wanted to make it known I was awake and that I knew they were there, so I quickly crawled out of my tent to say hello, but when I stood up, no one was there. How strange. I could have sworn I just heard voices and heard walking around my camp. Where did they go? I slowly turned in place, doing a quick visual sweep of the entire perimeter of the campground. After a moment, I confirmed once again that I was alone out here. There wasn't a single soul in sight. Weird, I muttered under my breath. Then I turned once more to face the playground and gave it a long look. The dilapidated play area felt eerie now, seeing it in the darkness, especially after hearing so many strange sounds. Once again, I crawled back into my tent and into my sleeping bag. I was closing my eyes and just getting comfortable again when I heard it once more. Another giggle, accompanied by the sound of creaking playground equipment. This time, I willed myself to ignore it and just turned over to face the backside of my tent. I can't explain the sounds, but they shouldn't stop me from getting some sleep because it's probably just the breeze. It's honestly nothing to worry about. I finally dozed off and got a few hours of shut-eye, only to be startled awake by a sound. It was like stones clattering to the ground outside of my tent. I'm just tired, I tried to reason with myself, but before I could turn, I saw the side of my tent ripple from something hitting it, and then the sound of rocks clattering once again. What the hell? I muttered in confusion. Before I could process anything, it happened again, and then again. Someone was throwing rocks at my tent. "Hey, knock it off," I shouted. The throwing stopped, but that's when I realized I couldn't hear anything. Not even the sounds of the crickets or the breeze could be heard now. The energy of the camp suddenly felt heavy as the realization that someone is out there hiding from me settled in. This couldn't be explained away by just the wind anymore. There has to be someone hiding out there, walking around, laughing and throwing rocks. The silence sat undisturbed, as if we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. But then, all of a sudden, the night sounds returned. The breeze, the hum of the crickets, nature's symphony rose once again. Hearing the sounds of nature relaxed me, but that wasn't all I heard. Footsteps again, almost as if it were a child running or skipping around in the grass, and then another giggle. "That's it, I'm finding this kid," I muttered to myself, stumbling out of my tent to look for them. I shined my flashlight around, illuminating the perimeter of the camp again. The beam light didn't catch anything of note until I began to pan it across the playground. Sitting perched at the top of the slide, I swear I saw a little girl, but when I blinked, she was gone. Am I going crazy? I asked myself out loud, what the hell was that? But what made the sighting most unnerving was her face. She had been wearing a smile that was much too large for her small face, and her eyes were hollow like jet black holes. I continued to stare at the spot where I'd seen her, my hands and flashlight shaking as I tried to calm myself down. What do? I can't find any physical person here. All I have is that bizarre 1-second sighting, and I'm up on the side of a mountain in the middle of the night. It's not like I can easily pack up and hike out of here. I checked my phone and realized the time was now 3:34 a.m. not exactly an ideal time to head back to the car. Well, at best, my eyes and ears are playing tricks on me. At worst, there might actually be some sort of ghost child staying in this campground with me. As terrifying as the thought was, the ghost seemed most unlikely, so I should just tough it out and wait for the sun to rise. A giggle sounded from somewhere off in the darkness, as if this child somehow knew which way I'd made up my mind. I frantically flashed my light around, trying to see her, but I didn't catch another glimpse. I swallowed nervously, not liking that she seemed happy I was staying longer. Look, I can't leave right now, so if you're real, just leave me alone, okay? I asked into the darkness. You don't have permission to touch me, I added, throwing in something I'd heard people on all the ghost TV shows say. There was no reply, so I hoped the silence was us coming to a quiet understanding. This time when I entered my tent, I didn't try to sleep again. I was wide awake, with adrenaline pumping, so there was no point in that. Instead, I flipped on my camping lantern to light up the inside of my tent, and I pulled out a book from my pack. Maybe some reading could take my mind off of the hairs standing up on the back of my neck. Some more time passed without incident, but then I started to notice my electric lantern beginning to flicker, as if someone were fiddling with the switch to shut it off. I scooped it up and quickly put it on my other side to get it away from whatever was causing that, but as I looked at the tent wall to my left, I froze. A single hand was imprinted into the soft fabric wall, as if someone were standing outside, pressing their hand into it. I watched as a second hand joined it, and then slowly the form of a face, all pressing into the wall, as if they could sink through and get inside. I finally screamed and threw the lantern at it as I scrambled out of my tent with a knife in hand. "Get away from me, I'm armed," I shouted, looking over the tent to see who the culprit was, but there was nobody there. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. This can't be happening. I'm going crazy, I thought to myself. Then I ducked down, looking back inside the tent to see the face and the hands were still there. It was like somebody was still leaning into my tent, but whenever I'd stand up, my light would be met with an empty space. No, I'm out, I finally decided, snatching up my backpack with my most essential things and leaving everything else behind as I booked it out of there. I have no idea what I experienced there, and I was never brave enough to go back and investigate further. All I know is that it only takes one event to change your point of view, and I'm definitely a believer in the paranormal now.